We're going to start with the ICJ story, just because that's probably where I'm going to spend most of my time. I have a lot to say, and there's a lot to discuss. So if you are not aware, the ICJ did deliver a preliminary ruling today in reference to the case that South Africa has brought against Israel. And I want to be very clear here because I don't want people to misinterpret what was ruled today. The case that South Africa brought to the courts is that Israel is committing genocide. One thing you have to remember, and I talked about this a couple nights ago, that actual factor, it could take years for the court to rule on that. The decision that was made today is a preliminary ruling. So we're going to go ahead and get started right with the ruling from the court. We're going to jump in here. This is a clip here from Democracy Now! And then I'm going to tell you some of the things about this ruling that I feel does not go far enough. Don't get me wrong. This isn't good for Israel. It's not good at all. It's a reputation killer. I'm just going to be honest. But does it go far enough? Let's go ahead and get into the ruling here. And I'm also going to explain to you the judge. Her name is Judge Joan. I'm going to explain to you where this woman actually came from. I think you'd be interested in hearing that. Let's get into it.
And ordered provisional measures, but stopped short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. The ruling was read out by the president of the court, Joan Donoghue. She began with the finding that South Africa had jurisdiction to bring the case against Israel.
In the court's view, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. In light of the following, the court concludes that, prima facie, it has jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the convention to entertain the case.
South Africa had asked the court, as a matter of extreme urgency, to impose emergency measures to protect Palestinians in Gaza. The president of the court went on to read out the findings regarding South Africa's request for provisional measures.
In the court's view, the aforementioned facts and circumstances are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa and for which it is seeking protection are plausible. This is the case with respect to the right of Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts identified in Article 3.
So let's pause here. So what she is saying is that some of the claims from South Africa in reference to the genocide and the treatment of the Palestinians in Gaza, that also includes the humanitarian aid, are plausible. So again, I say this is a reputation killer for Israel. I told you guys before when they said they were going to court that South Africa actually had a very strong case. They did their homework. They looked for the right type of evidence. They showed video footage of some of the things that Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people, some of the phrases that they've been saying, whether it was the IDF or whether it was Israeli officials. So they made sure they did their homework.
Right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. The court then turns to the condition of the link between the plausible rights claimed by South Africa and the provisional measures requested. It considers that by their very nature, at least some of the provisional measures sought by South Africa are aimed at preserving the plausible rights it asserts on the basis of the Genocide Convention in the present case, namely, the right of the Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide and related prohibited acts mentioned in Article 3, and the right of South Africa to seek Israel's compliance with the latter's obligations under the convention. Therefore, a link exists between the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible and at least some of the provisional measures requested.
You hear that? So she said a link does exist between the two.
President of the court, Joan Donoghue, cited the killing of Palestinians in Gaza, mass displacement, deprivation of aid, and other charges brought by South Africa, and went on to say the court found a plausible risk that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza.
The court considers that there is urgency in the sense that there is a real and imminent risk that irreparable prejudice will be caused to the rights found by the court to be plausible before it gives its final decision.
So here she is admitting that Israel has prejudice against the Palestinian people. That's damning. Let's go on a little bit more.
The court concludes on the basis of the aforementioned considerations that the conditions required by its statute for it to indicate provisional measures are met. It is therefore necessary, pending its final decision, for the court to indicate certain measures in order to protect the rights claimed by South Africa that the court has found to be plausible.
For more, we're joined by three guests.
Okay. I wanted to show you that part there. The court does find at least some of the evidence from South Africa to be plausible. Now, I want you to know who that woman is. We're going to bring her picture back up for just a second. This is Judge Joan Donoghue. But do you know where she came from? I'll show you. Because, see, I think most of you probably have never even heard of this woman until today. She came from the U.S. State Department. Look at this. The president of the ICJ is Judge Joan Donoghue, former top legal advisor under Hillary Clinton at the State Department during the Obama administration. And they go on to say she will imminently read the court's ruling on South Africa's request for emergency provisional measures in Israel genocide case. So that's where she came from, the U.S. State Department. Interesting where people end up, right? Keep that in mind for further rulings. Just keep that in mind. They went on to say, this is Jeremy Scahill, the court could rule entirely in South Africa's favor and order all of the measures requested, including directing a halt to Israel's attacks and siege against Gaza. It could dismiss it entirely, or it could rule in favor of only some requests or create its tailored orders. So what happened in the court? Part of the problem, let's talk about some of the cons. Part of the problem with that ruling is that they did not actually call for a ceasefire. That's part of the problem, but more people are calling that out now. But when this decision was first announced, I noticed a lot of people on social media were just kind of like, yay, this is a huge victory. And I was like, no, this is not a huge victory. Don't get me wrong. This is a first step. This is a good step in the right direction, but we still have a ways to go. I really wish they would have called for a ceasefire because essentially Israel can continue to bomb Gaza. Now, the problem with this ruling is that the ICJ actually does not have the power to enforce any of this. So a ruling without enforcement, some people are going to refer to it as a slap on the wrist. Now, again, don't get me wrong. It damages Israel's reputation. And don't get it twisted either. South Africa is very well aware of how the ICJ operates. My comrade JB and I from RBN, we talked about this earlier today. South Africa knows the ICJ ain't about shit. South Africa knows that. But what South Africa wanted to do was show the entire world what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. So they know the ICJ can't enforce any of these things, but they wanted to show the world who Israel is. Now, there's more steps to take place, but obviously Netanyahu had to issue a response. Let's hear what he had to say.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people.
First 10 seconds, Netanyahu was already lying. So Israel has been proven multiple times they are not following international law. They have also been committing war crimes. First 10 seconds, already lying.
Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state.
Now he's going to claim that the ruling from the ICJ is basically anti-Semitism. They're being discriminated against. It's the same playbook, you guys. They use the same playbook over and over again. The Zionist playbook. You let me do what I want to do. Don't you dare try to hold me accountable. And if you do, I'm going to say that you're discriminating against me. Let's continue.
And it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization.
So now the claim is that Hamas is the genocider here. Hamas is not in power. The state of Israel is. There were estimated 1,200 Israelis that were killed on October 7th. As it stands right now, Israel has killed over 25,000 Palestinian people. And that's just the number today. We don't know what the number will be next week. But Hamas is the genocider in this situation, according to Netanyahu.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated the most horrific atrocities against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it vows to repeat these atrocities again and again and again. Our war is against Hamas terrorists, not against Palestinian civilians. We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as Hamas uses civilians as human shields. We will continue to do what is necessary to defend our country and defend our people.
So first of all, I showed you the video last night of Israelis blocking humanitarian efforts from entering into Gaza. So he's lying about that in reference to humanitarian efforts. This is Netanyahu basically trying to defend himself. And I can tell you right now, there are already calls in Israel asking for Netanyahu to resign, because this is an image killer, the ruling from the ICJ. Now, I told you I want to talk about the pros and the cons. The pro is the fact that this is a reputation killer for Israel. It's a right step in the direction that we need to go. The other pro is also the fact that the ICJ is acknowledging that South Africa did bring damning evidence against Israel, and they are calling for demands in reference to Israel. I'm going to show you those demands in just a second. And it shows the world what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. So there are pros to go along with this. But when we talk about some of the cons, again, they didn't demand an actual ceasefire. So that means, again, that Israel can continue to bomb Gaza. And they'll just do what Netanyahu did, use the defense that they are defending theirself. So as long as they can continue to say that, this is problematic. Now, what should happen going forward? Since they did not call for the ceasefire, we would need the UN Security Council to do so. And then that would put the pressure on the US government. You see, if the ICJ had called for the permanent ceasefire, that would have put more pressure on Joe Biden and his administration to also call for the ceasefire. But let me show you what they actually demanded, and then we'll get to the video next. Okay, do it this way.
So it's...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to click on this one. ICJ refused to order a ceasefire or suspension of Israeli attacks. The ICJ only ordered the following. Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent genocidal acts against Palestinians. Okay, so isn't that the same thing that the Biden administration told Netanyahu a couple of months ago? He told Netanyahu to do everything that it can to protect the civilian life. Okay, so that's not really a new thing. They are using the word genocidal, though. So that's one thing. This piece here, Israel will ensure that its army doesn't commit any genocidal acts. Israel will prevent and punish public incitement to commit genocide against the Palestinians. That's in reference to some of the phrases that have come from Israeli officials where they've called for the end of all Palestinians. Israel will ensure the provision of urgent services and humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israel will ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of genocide, meaning they shouldn't purge any evidence. Israel will submit a report to the court in 1 month showing its compliance with these orders. So this basically comes across like a list of recommendations. These are all the things that the ICJ is demanding Israel to do. But as I told you earlier, they can't enforce it. That's the big problem. So it's basically Israel, these are the things you need to do, and we demand that you bring us a report within 1 month. And if they don't, how do Palestinians feel about the ruling? Because I noticed one of the things that I chose to do today, while a lot of people were jumping up and cheering, I chose to look at the Palestinian accounts that I follow to see how they felt about this ruling. They're not happy with this ruling. They are not happy with it. So, in fact, one of them that isn't happy with it is Motaz. So we know Motaz, I've shown him on here before. He's one of the journalists that has been reporting in Gaza. He said, F the ICJ and the whole world governments. Listen to what he had to say. I told you, they're not happy.
So it was a lie, a big lie. Thank for South Africa for all the efforts. But it looks like the ICJ, it's pro-Israelis. So fuck them and fuck the whole governments around the world. Only the people who are standing with the with the Palestinian, even with the humanity. So, but we literally lost our trust in every decision maker in the whole world. So yeah, again, fuck the ICJ. So it was a lie, a big lie. Thank for South Africa for all the efforts. But it looks like the ICJ, it's pro-Israelis. So fuck them and fuck the whole governments around the world. Only the people who are standing with the with the Palestinian, even with the humanity. So, but we literally lost our trust in every decision maker in the whole world.
If you follow other Palestinian accounts on Twitter, you'll see similar responses. I don't want to, break your spirits here or anything, guys, but I do want to keep it real with you, right? So again, we're talking about the pros and the cons. Richie Medhurst had a really good take on this. Richie said, "It is my job to translate politician to English. So let me explain what the ICJ just ruled. Israel can keep slaughtering Palestinians. Take your time and stop announcing the genocide when you speak Hebrew. Also, give Palestinians some food before you shoot them." Back in a few years. That's essentially what this is. Like I said, it's a good first step. But this is not the end all be all. More needs to happen. And this is why I was so frustrated about this today, that they did not call for the ceasefire. If they would have called for the ceasefire, that puts pressure on other world leaders to do the same damn thing. Israel can still bomb Gaza. They can still kill Palestinian people. You think Netanyahu is just going to follow those demands that they gave? They have no enforcement. Now, bring up the rest of Richie's here. This does not negate in any way what South Africa did. They are champions. They came in that court with receipts of the biggest crime today and put it on the record. It is not their fault. The post-World War II legal framework is rigged by Israel, the US, and the UK. And remember, the UK tends to follow the lead of the United States. Now, I want you to hear this. I saw this on MSNBC earlier. Listen to how they refer to this, that it's not as serious as people think. Again, like I said, to Israel's reputation, it is damning. They did put this on the world stage. So again, shout out to South Africa. Nobody else was willing to do it. Right? But listen how they refer to this.
And joining us now is Ambassador Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York. Ambassador, always a pleasure to see you. I thank you for your time. What was your first reaction to this International Court of Justice's decision, partial decision today?
Well, okay, Jose, it's like this, it's like a yellow card in soccer and football. It was a stern warning. And, there are two ways of looking at it, or two takeaways. The first is the court said that, the court refrained from asking Israel to cease fire and to immediately halt any military operations. Had it chose to do so, it would have vindicated the argument that there could be a genocide, or that conditions for a genocide, for some form of genocide, exist. The court did.
You hear that part? Remember, they didn't ask Israel. I read the demands to you. They didn't ask Israel to halt any military operations. He's letting you know right now. If they would have done that, this would be huge. It would be bigger than huge. I would have been like, yeah, man, jumping up for joy. But they didn't ask them to do that. Again, you have to remember who this woman is. I told you, she came from the U.S. State Department.
Not do that. On the other hand, as Matt Bradley, your correspondent, accurately put it, the court did issue provisional orders for Israel, all of which amount to a suspicion that those conditions for genocide could be met. Now, this is not genocide from a legal point of view, because you need to prove intent. And intent is a very difficult thing to prove, and I'm pretty satisfied that there's absolutely no intent on Israel's side. However,
so he's lying there. There is definitely intent on Israel's side. We've seen video footage of them making the comments that they want the Palestinian people gone. Netanyahu had the speech in front of the UN where he proposed the greater Israel idea, where Gaza was also removed from the map. The West Bank was not there. Obviously, he wants to expand Israel in reference to the greater Israel plan. So him saying that, I'm sure there's no intent from Israel, that's a blatant lie. That's a blatant lie. Now, what he is correct about, proving intent in court is difficult. Very, very difficult. And I'll give you an example. There was a claim that was filed at the EEOO, the Equal Opportunity Office at BU. And what they will tell you is that most of the claims that come to them are dismissed. You want to know why? Because they have to prove that there was intent. And if they can't prove that there was intent, then they have to throw the claim out. So intent is difficult to prove in the court of law. However, in this particular situation, there is a multitude of video evidence to prove Israel's intent. So he's telling some truth, but he's not telling the whole truth.
If you look at the humanitarian aid and the medical aid that is stipulated in the ruling, you see that even though it's not mentioned specifically, Jose, the court is essentially saying there should be a ceasefire. Now, tie this now to the possibility of a hostage deal that is being discussed, deliberated, or negotiated, mediated by Qatar and indirectly by the U.S. And that also includes an extended ceasefire. So take those two together. We're looking at the possibility of a ceasefire. In and of itself, the decision was less than what Israel feared, but it's a major, major slap on the wrist.
Yeah, and
you hear what he's referring to it as? A slap on the wrist. So Israel got somewhat of a break here. Don't get me wrong. They didn't walk away with their hands clean, but they got somewhat of a break because, like I said, the court did not call for a ceasefire or a halt of military operations. When we talk about a sense of urgency, if the court felt strongly that Israel was committing genocide, then wouldn't they demand that you stop any type of military activity in Gaza? Because that screams a sense of urgency. Wouldn't they make that demand? So this is what I'm trying to tell you guys. Basically, the ICJ, they tried to both sides the situation. There's no both sides when Israel is the oppressor and the occupier, the occupier, and they are the ones that are in power. So how do you both sides this situation? This is not just about the war in Gaza. This is also about the illegal settlements that are happening in the West Bank, which the UN has ruled multiple times that these settlements are illegal. The Palestinian people have been displaced. They're still displacing Palestinian people. So Israel is in power and occupying the Palestinian people. The ICJ knows this. That judge that sat up there and read that ruling is very well aware. All those people sitting in that court, they are very well aware what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. Do not let them fool you. This is not the first time they've heard these claims. Not the first time. But don't get it twisted. They are still going to try their best to protect somewhat, some part of Israel's reputation. Going a little bit more here.
Ambassador, you signed a letter along with 40 other former Israeli officials who are now calling on Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign. What do you think needs to happen? What needs to change?
But look, to be honest, Jose, he should have resigned on October 7th, and then on November 7th, and then December 7th, and then January 7th. And he's probably going to get to February 7th without resigning. So this letter is more an expression of will and wishful thinking rather than a prescription or a plan of action. He needs to resign. Now, if he doesn't resign, resignation is nothing that I expect him to do. What he needs to do, what the political system needs to do, is to call for an election. Obviously, there is a heightened level of frustration with him in the U.S. and the Biden administration. Obviously, he has not cooperated on American visions of post-war Gaza. And obviously, he's not a partner in Americanized to what's called a reconfigured Middle East. So the pressure, the domestic pressure and the international pressure, particularly that coming from the U.S., will, I think, in the next 2-3 months, force him into calling for an early election. Now, there's one more thing, if I may add, Jose.
Yes.
His coalition is going to be extraordinarily resistant and opposed to the combination of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice's ruling, and the hostage deal, on grounds that a ceasefire fails to address Israel's war objectives, toppling, eliminating, eradicating, annihilating Hamas. And so I could see his coalition. I mean, there's a possibility of his coalition imploding within those 2-3 months period.
Okay, so here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we all know Netanyahu is a problem. But this didn't start with Netanyahu's administration. The displacement of the Palestinian people started in 1948 with the Nakba, right? So this has been going on all along. Now, what should he call out? He should call out Zionism, but he's not going to do that. And if he did, he wouldn't be on MSNBC in the first damn place. That's the problem. Because you see, Netanyahu can resign. They'll just replace him with some other puppet. As long as you still have this Zionist state in power, the next leader can continue to carry on the same crimes against the Palestinian people. The Oracle says the ICJ tried to punt on this issue, and this decision erodes the integrity of the court and the efficacy of international law. And I'll say it this way. We want to talk about a sports analogy here. The ICJ, they honestly could have, if the ICJ was the quarterback, instead of throwing the ball down the field 30 plus yards and landing a touchdown, they decided to hand the ball to a running back only to get tackled 5 yards down. That's what they did. They could have thrown for a freaking touchdown, but they decided to hand the ball off. That's what the ICJ did. Now, here's this question. Can Israel ignore the world's court order? We want to talk about this idea of intent here, because that gentleman told you, well, they can't prove intent in reference to Israel and Gaza. And I told you there's multiple videos that do prove that. This gentleman here, his name is Rod Segal. He is actually going to explain this, how they do actually have the case to prove that Israel had intent. Listen to him.
It's a context. I think it's very important to say that the court basically accepted South Africa's argument that Israel's quote-unquote evacuation orders are not actually, as Israel claimed, humanitarian measures, but they're actually genocidal in essence. That means that they are meant, which is what they did, to displace millions of people, almost 2 million Palestinians, well, virtually almost all the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and under intensive bombings. And we know that Israel also bombed Palestinians fleeing on routes that it designated as safe. It also bombed Palestinians in the southern part of the Strip early on, which it designated as safe. And of course, under the conditions of the total siege, where we today, indeed, this measure did what it was intended to do, right? It created famine, it created the spread of infectious disease, it created a population that has no access to clean water, has no fuel, has no medical supply. It destroyed all the universities in Gaza. It destroyed a majority of the hospitals. It destroyed agricultural land. It targeted cultural sites. So everything that we know historically that happens in genocide, and with this massive displacement that is now, we know that even if Israel's attack stops now, many Palestinians will continue to die of these conditions of life, again, if to quote the convention, that Israel deliberately created in order to bring about the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part. So I thought...
Look at Gaza. Look at it. You can't live in this. It's destroyed. Look at that. So one of the strongest cases to prove intent was one of the examples that he gave about the evacuation process and instructions. When Israel told the Palestinian civilians to leave North Gaza and to go to the southern part of Gaza, and then they still proceeded to bomb the southern part of Gaza. When they told the Palestinian people that there were certain areas that were declared as safe zones, and they still continued to kill. We saw the video last night, to kill Palestinians in the safe zones. When they blocked off exits after they told the Palestinian civilians to go to those exits, and then they bombed those exits and made it so that they could not leave, that is a hell lot of intent. That's one of the best examples that you can use to prove that there was intent. And then there's the video footage of Israeli officials blatantly saying on TV shows that they want the Palestinian people gone. But that example that he gave you, they destroyed all the hospitals, all of them. So if you didn't die by a bomb, but you're injured, you can die because of the injuries, because there's no hospitals. They don't have anesthesia. They're trying to do surgeries on people without anesthesia. There's that. You're caged in Gaza. Where are you supposed to go? They bombed the schools. They killed the kids. They've been killing the kids. And what Israel has done to the Palestinian people, guys, this can happen to any other group in the world. Any other group in the world. Let's go on for a little bit more. Again, his name is Raz Segal.
That it was very important that the ruling actually quoted and emphasized both the issues of intent and the dynamics of violence and the conditions that we see now on the ground. This is very, very significant. Again, the court is saying that there is plausibility that Israel is likely, has committed and is committing acts of genocide in Gaza.
So remember the plausibility. Remember what Judge Jones said, that it is plausible based on the evidence presented by South Africa. Would have been better if the court would have said it is without a doubt that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, right? Would have been better. Would have been better if they would have called for the permanent ceasefire, right? If they would have said halt the military actions, but they didn't. And because they didn't do that, you got clowns out here like John Kirby using this as defense that the U.S. government doesn't really have anything to worry about here in reference to sending those weapons to Israel. Because the court did not make it blatantly so, John Kirby is able to make comments like this when he's questioned about it, about the ruling.
Kirby, I wanted to ask you about the lower court decision ordering Israel to prevent acts of genocide, but it stopped short of ordering a ceasefire. You have suggested multiple times that South Africa's claim does not really have merit. And I'm wondering, how does the U.S. repair relations with South Africa, which is a big voice for non-aligned countries in the global South?
I don't believe that our disagreement over the founding claim of the allegation causes any permanent damage to the bilateral relationship with South Africa. We just happen to disagree on that point. But we're also going to keep working on that relationship as we do many others.
So you fundamentally believe the U.S., they claim that the U.S. is supporting a genocidal state. That is not going to impact relations with South Africa.
I don't believe I heard that from South Africa.
Yes, South Africa did say that. So here's John Kirby lying. South Africa definitely did say that the United States government is supporting a genocidal state. And South Africa also said they want to hold the United States government accountable too, and the UK. So John Kirby is full of it. He's lying. And that reporter knows it.
Africa filed a case based on allegations that they believe genocide was being conducted by Israel in Gaza. I don't believe it was directed at us at all. We simply have said consistently.
That's a damn lie. That is a damn lie. When did I cover that? I'm trying to remember, Eric. I think I covered that. I want to say last year. Maybe that was December or late November when I covered that. It might have been late November when South Africa released that statement that they also blamed the United States. Crazy, right? Such a mess.
In Gaza, I don't believe it was directed at us at all. We simply have said consistently, we find that claim is unfounded. And, you know, the court also did not find Israel guilty of genocide.
You hear that last part? He said the court did not find Israel guilty of genocide. So I told you there are different parts to this case. What they ruled today was a preliminary hearing, right? So the genocide part, that can take years. I told you guys that a couple of days ago. That can take years for that ruling. So because the court did not come out and say it in that way, he's able to sit there and say, well, they didn't find them guilty of genocide. But the court said that based on the evidence presented by South Africa, they said that it is plausible. This is not good for the United States. I'm going to let you guys know right now, this is not good for us. And you'll see why in just a second, because honestly, it's not just about what happened at the ICJ. You need to know about what's happening in Oakland, California, because this is all coming to a head. And people can sit up there and John Kirby can lie. Anthony Blinken can lie. Joe Biden can lie. But the world sees that the U.S. government supplied Israel with those damn weapons and that the U.S. government has constantly been defending Israel, right? It was December. Thank you, JK. It was December. Okay. I couldn't remember when I said it, but thank you. Now, in Oakland, California, Palestinians are taking the Biden administration to court this week. I told you, Joe Biden needed to get as far away from Netanyahu as possible. Palestinians are taking the Biden administration to court this week. This week, a federal court in Oakland will be hearing arguments in a lawsuit accusing the Biden administration of failing to prevent a genocide in Gaza. The case could bring U.S. support for the Israeli assault on Gaza to a halt. And I like the fact that they used the word assault. Eric and I were talking about this earlier today. Maybe we need to start changing our vocabulary. Instead of saying the word war, because, you know, neocons just eat that word up, right? Say assault. Israel's assault on Gaza. It's much stronger. But it goes on to say, the claim was filed against President Joe Biden, Secretary Anthony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin by the Center for Constitutional Rights in November. The legal effort was taken on behalf of 2 Palestinian organizations and 8 Palestinians living in the United States. The effort is backed by almost 80 human rights organizations across the globe. We need to pay attention to this case here, right? So in San Francisco, check this out. If I was Joe Biden, I would be embarrassed. Pro-Palestinian messages painted outside the Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building, U.S. Courthouse in Oakland. Inside, a judge was hearing a case brought by Palestinian rights groups accusing President Biden and top officials of aiding genocide in Gaza. So hopefully I'll be able to have more information about that and cover that on Tuesday. But look at this, guys. This is in San Francisco. Biden complicit in genocide, right there for the whole city to see. See that? It goes on to say, no bombs to Israel. He should be embarrassed, right? Don't you think that Joe Biden should be embarrassed? I would be embarrassed. What's that, Ninja? Today they asked for the injunction. Okay. I should be able to cover it more on Tuesday then. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this level of pushback. I know there was pushback in reference to the Iraq war, but this feels like a whole different level. And the Biden administration isn't listening. Why aren't they listening? Because they're in Israel's pocket. When you have an organization like AIPAC that owns most of the politicians in DC, this is the kind of thing that happens. You won't hold this country accountable. You're giving this country $3.8 billion a year, but they don't want to give you health care. They don't want to give you a home. They don't want to give you free public education at the universities in this country. Meanwhile, Israel has free college. Everyone in Israel has health care. This is why demands are very important. And we need to stress this. And when people come to you and they push back and say, we have the right to exist and da-da-da and all that stuff, you push back and you tell them the Palestinians have a right to exist. You push back and you tell them, why the hell your country getting all this money from my country? And they don't want to help people in this country. This should be the big pushback. It's great that we have all the protests that are happening and they're still going on. That's great. It makes me happy. I've been to the protests. We need to keep that up. But in the list of demands, and I told you a ceasefire is the bare minimum that we're asking for, there should also be in that list of demands, the Palestinian people need self-determination in the occupation, which I think that is one of the demands as well of the Palestinian people. And also stop giving our damn money to another country. Blatantly as that. Stop giving them $3.8 billion a year and you don't want to take care of your own damn people in this country. That should be the demand. Always bring it back to the money. And I want to show you just how much they're in the pocket. They're in the pocket. This interview right here, very revealing from Netanyahu. Again, like I said, Israel's own words are its worst enemy. Listen to this.
But you're in the wrong place. And he said, why? He said, because you should be in America. He said, why America? He said, because America will be the rising power in the world. There may be a world conflict. America will emerge as the great power, and America can make Britain do what Britain doesn't want to do. That is, recognize a Jewish state. Well, they went to America. Jabotinsky died, and my father continued alone during the during the war years, agitating for Zionism. He was all of 32. And he began, that's in 1942. He decided to do something that no Jewish leader did before.
Did you hear what he just said? He said his father was like, you need to go to America. He said his father was agitating for Zionism.
He went to the Republicans. And he went to Senator Taft, who was a very great senator, because Roosevelt would not hear of a Jewish state. He was absolutely opposed to it. He didn't want to antagonize the British. He thought that the British wanted to cater to the Arabs. He simply would not do it. He was a great leader, but it was for the Jewish people, that wasn't good. So not being able to persuade the Democrats, he went to the Republicans.
Everybody hear this? You want to see where the right wing, the extreme right wing government came from in Israel? Listen to what he said. He went to the Republicans because the Democrats would not hear of a Jewish state, right?
And he said to Senator Taft to advocate, to put in the Republican National Convention on the platform, support for unrestricted Jewish immigration in a Jewish state. Well, Roosevelt didn't like it, but 3 months later, he had no choice. The Democratic National Convention adopted a similar platform. So in many ways, my father was the progenitor of the bipartisan American support for Israel. But of course, he did.
You hear that? His father was the progenitor of the bipartisan support for Israel. This man talks too much. His own mouth gets him into trouble. I sincerely hope that the UN Security Council goes a step further. And I sincerely hope that they call for the ceasefire. Because other than that, Israel can continue to bomb Palestinians in Gaza. And as long as they continue to say that we're defending ourselves, what are we going to do? So I'm ready for the next set when you are, Eric. So it's a first step. This ruling from the ICJ, the way I see it as a first step, but we need to go further.